Vice President Kamala Harris has picked Minnesota Governor Tim Walz to be her running mate. Reacting online, many on the right feeling energized, calling out Walz for his progressive policies. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis tweeted, quote, Harris-Walz, most left-wing ticket in American history. Minnesota was ground zero for the BLM riots of 2020. Harris egged it on, and Walz sat by and let Minneapolis burn. The Daily Wire's Ben Shapiro similarly said, quote, picking Walz is a massive gift to the Republicans. He's a radical leftist from a non-swing state with a long history of insane statements who presided over the burning down of his state in 2020. Kamala picked him because he's not a Jew and she's too online. Meghan McCain wrote, quote, you'd be hard-pressed to find a more extreme progressive running mate. He is a Trojan horse with a red state accent. Fox News columnist David Marcus said, quote, every Republican I know is thrilled at the selection of Walz. Shapiro was going to be a problem. Now, not only is it not him, but Harris publicly humiliated him. Perfect.
But many on the left are applauding Harris's pick. Take a listen to Representative Nancy Pelosi reacting to the news on Morning Joe.
Tim Walz is wonderful, and she had many good choices among the six and certainly among the two. I'm a big fan of Governor Shapiro. Tim Walz, I know very well. He served in the House. To characterize him as left is so unreal. It's just not what the question. He's right down the middle. He's a Heartland of America Democrat. And he was the chair of our Veterans Affairs Committee. And I don't want anybody to forget that, because he made tremendous, tremendous gains for our veterans. Working with our folks on the Appropriations Committee and with the Speaker, we made more progress than had ever been made in the history of our country since the GI Bill under his leadership. 25 years in the National Guard, longest serving non-commissioned officer ever served in the Congress of the United States. So he brings the security credential, he brings the rural credential, and he will do well in Moral America.
So the official account, White Dudes for Harris, tweeted, quote, he's an amazing leader who delivered a powerful speech last week, highlighting the importance of protecting fertility treatments like IVF and rejecting Project 2025. Also, I will say, on the front of families, which has become a real point of contention in this race, especially between the vice presidential pick for Trump, J.D. Vance. Walz is very popular in his state for his policy around protecting paid family leave. And I don't know if these attacks are really landing. Shapiro doesn't have as much experience as Tim Walz. To say that he's Jewish and that's why he's not selected is such a stretch of why he wasn't selected. Shapiro served in a foreign military. Yes, it was Israel's, but that doesn't have to do with him being Jewish. That has to do with a question around, will someone want someone who served in a foreign military at the highest office when many Americans are not happy with military spending right now? And this attack that Walz let Minnesota burn in 2020. He called in the National Guard. He served in the National Guard for 24 years. He made that decision at a time when many governors and mayors were not asking for outside help. And he was the guy to say, you know, we need to bring peace to the state. We're going to bring in the National Guard to make sure everyone's safe. So people are scared of his policies. Why? I don't think everyday people are. I think right-wing commentators are, because they've been running on the government's horrible, and people tend to agree because the government hasn't been delivering on public programs. Tim Walz is an example of, what if they actually did and didn't cut those public programs to let the private companies that lobby a lot of the right wing in America to cut the public programs so they can come in and profit off of something that used to be guaranteed. And we've seen the crumbling of a lot of our infrastructure, our water, our roads, our schools, when private companies come in and do the bare minimum to make as much money as possible. So I think that's where they're coming from with that. They're scared of someone who actually delivers on public programs in a world where they want things that should be publicly provided to be something or private companies profit off of. So I just don't see this working.
I mean, you're right. The conservative view is 100% exactly in the opposite direction from what you just outlined the progressive view. The conservative view is that the government does not successfully build things. The more the government spends on things, the worse it gets. See every sector of our economy getting more spending from government over the last 30 or even 50 years, getting worse. Everything from education to healthcare and housing, the most aggressively subsidized in government managed programs, aspects of your life. Everything the government touches gets worse and worse and worse. Everything that's mostly left to private sectors, tech, innovation, all of that gets cheaper. We're able to possess more goods, more in the tech sector specifically. What you're able to purchase on those categories gets better because of private innovation. Everything the government touches and runs gets more expensive and worse. And while it sounds great, obviously we need to fix our roads, we need to fix our bridges, we need to do all of that. What's stopping it? It's private contractors, not government employees who end up fixing those things. It's businesses, and they do it. Yes, they do it to make a profit, and there has to be the profit incentive is to build things and to provide things that people want. And the government has a role to play in setting regulations and to also providing some funding for things that we think ought to be paid for collectively. That doesn't mean they have to provide and administer it, and I would argue that they don't do a good job providing and administering it. And some of the regulations, many of them coming from progressive Democrats, have made it impossible to do anything in this country, to build anything. The delay in getting roads and bridges fixed, so you have to do an environmental impact project of any time you want to, re-landscape your house. You gotta call in, you gotta get some red tape procedure signed off on, and that is what's killing this country. And it's the ideology of big government liberals, of one in which Walz is quite proud of. I think we'll have to do more to look specifically at how he handled the 2020 BLM riots. You say he sent in the National Guard. I know conservatives are really knocking him on that. I think there's going to be a lot to knock him on COVID as well. I took a brief look at that a couple days ago when I wrote about the VP options. I'm going to do a deeper dive on that later this week. But you say Shapiro wasn't passed over because he's Jewish, and okay, maybe that's the case. But it certainly it seems like the opposition to him from a lot of progressive leftists was it's more than just that he's Jewish. It's that the perception that he is more pro-Israel than the other options. Although I'm not sure his actual policy prescription. He's been very critical of Netanyahu. Shapiro has. He's said that Israel can defend itself, which is something Walz has said, which is something Harris. Harris is part of the Biden administration, right? Which the left calls Genocide Joe. Are any of these people really all that distinct in their desire to continue supporting Israel and funding Israel, frankly, which is not even something I want to do? I don't know. That's what's given rise to the idea that it was the Jewishness, because I don't know that his views are going to be all that much a departure from Walz's or Harris's on foreign policy, at least.
Well, Harris's husband is Jewish, so I think the idea that she wouldn't want a running mate just because he's Jewish is ridiculous. I think people are assessing.
Well, would it be too many Jewish people in the prominent positions? Is what conservatives say the left had decided.
No one on the left has said that. Only people on the right has said that. And I think that's telling. So I think people are looking at policy decisions and they're asking, does this make my life better? Does Trump's tax cuts to corporations make their life better? Because people have been told that trickle-down economics, making the environment in the country better for big business, will make their lives better. And I think it's been too long, since the 1970s, when that idea was a dream. We haven't seen it work. Working class people have less purchasing power of their dollars than they did in 2009. They're 27% less and 40% less since 1968 if we assess minimum wage over time and the purchasing power of someone earning minimum wage in the United States. But we've seen corporate profits increase exponentially, in part to Trump's tax cuts. So yes, people don't like big government and government spending and adding dollars to the deficit if that means they're not getting anything in return. If it means it's not growing the economy in a way where working people, everyday people, benefit. Having corporations with profit margins that are 40% is ridiculous. And I think people would rather see corporations pay their fair share in taxes and that money go to things like building schools, like paid family leave programs, like making sure Social Security is solvent and people have a good retirement when they've worked their whole lives. So this attack that it's all big government, when Walz has demonstrated kind of the antidote to this idea that we give a bunch of money to the richest people in the country and we ensure that what we have is the privatization of a lot of our industry and working people suffer. Instead, he's decided to directly invest in public programs like feeding kids, like building roads. And yes, in the Midwest, environmental policy is actually popular in red areas because they make their living on farming. And climate change has been a disaster for a lot of farmers when it comes to drought and flooding. So policies like that, you'd be surprised, are actually popular in the Midwest. I think what they're looking for is someone like Walz who does that without also being one of the typical liberal elites, which Walz is not. So I think that's why Republicans are reacting so harshly. I think they're just scared.
I think they're elated. I think they see this as a big opportunity. I think he doesn't sound like a liberal elite. I agree with you on that. But yeah, I hope he runs very much on his true beliefs, which are, yes, confiscating massive amounts of wealth from the productive parts of the economy, redistributing them and shutting them down to ever grow the federal government in some vain or naive hope of serving people more and better services, which the government is never, ever able to do. I hope that is front and center as they
Walz say those things, Robbie?
What's that? Well, that's what you're saying. You're saying those are his policies. He said he's proud to be a big liberal, that socialism is just neighborliness. He self-identifies that way. You're aptly describing. I agree with you in your characterization of him that he wants a massive, is a tax and spend liberal who wants a massive expansion of government authority to take money from the productive parts of our economy.
I think, people watching the program will hear that what I just said is not what you just said. On the socialism front, that's a misquote. He said they can scream socialism, but we just build roads and schools. He never advocated for socialism. He never advocated for big government or big public spending in that way. Trump's added $8.8 trillion to the deficit. So drawing that line doesn't make much sense. And you're saying a bunch of things that Tim Walz has never said himself. So I think that just speaks to the right being a little bit afraid of this guy.
They are, they were afraid of Josh Shapiro. They're happy to have Tim Walz join the ticket, as am I. I
just think the criticism should be things people actually said.
He has actually said that. You're describing his positions accurately. You just think they're good things. His position is that massively increasing taxes, massively taking money from from corporations. That's going to make our economy better. It would make it raise the cost of doing business, raise the cost of all the things we buy, the food we eat. That's going to be good for working people in this country. Yes, that is the Harris-Walz pitch to Americans. We'll see how they like it, if it resonates with them. And we'll have more Rising right after this.